Welcome back to the Great Conversation. Today we are talking about a super important topic, the foundation of where our channel is really going.
Yes.
Because to build a life that we love to wake up to, I really think that we need to talk about what is our foundation.
Yep.
What is the purpose of life?
The purpose of life is to be alive and conscious of what you are doing. To be informed about the decisions and the areas that you are actively pursuing and actively participating in life. Now, as believers, our goal in life, our purpose in life should be to love God and glorify Him forever, right? That should be the expression of everything that we put our hands to. That is what should come out of that purpose and task. But if we're not alive, if we're not consciously thinking about each decision we're making and how it impacts and makes ripples effects through generations, then what are we living for? Mm-hmm. What is the stinking point?
Yeah.
We're just cruising through life, blindly going along with culture, ideology, faith that maybe my grandfather said to me, faith that maybe some random preacher said to me, and not grappling it for myself, not saying this is what I believe, this is how I'm going at it, this is what makes sense, this is how I want to raise my child. That's why I screwed up yesterday, and really understanding it.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this earlier. As believers, as followers of Jesus Christ, we really struggle with this idea, like you just said, about glorifying Him forever. So what does that mean? Like
it feels so mystical.
We're just in this cathedral all day,
yes.
and we're just worshiping Him, and this is where the spirit and the body are so closely knit that you cannot separate them. And because of that, we do have to work. The world does exist, struggle does exist, pain and suffering, and this idea of I have to go to work to make money so that we can buy food and buy gas and we can grow up in a comfortable home. Like these are
because we desire that.
Yeah, we have those desires.
Yeah.
They are somewhat necessary, at least the food, shelter, clothing.
The needs, so to speak.
And so as the church has this constant question of like, what is too much work? What is too much money? Is that really necessary?
Yeah.
And I think we get so caught up in these questions and all the like nitpicking that we completely throw off the whole thing of living and what is living for. And then we don't even really just take the work of our hands and go 100% out and say, everything that I'm doing in this work is for the glory of God because I have to work anyways.
Yes.
And so let's be alive and do it to the glory of God.
One of my favorite arguments with you, and people read Ecclesiastes in the Bible and they say, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And they get depressed. Yes. And I came to you a few years ago and I thought, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Hey, it doesn't matter. Let's just have fun at life and just do whatever and do it to the best of our abilities and glorify God in it because it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
And so people take the negative approach of that and say, well, it doesn't matter. So I'll just work this half-baked, crappy job. I'll try and get my really cool truck and then maybe I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like that is so unpurposeful living. That is so unfoundational to building a life you love to wake up to.
Yeah, and I struggle with this way more than you do. You are much more at leisure just to find the simple pleasures in life and be satisfied in them.
That was a fantastic cherry I ate a few minutes ago.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh man, I shouldn't have had that cherry. It probably wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
And so growing up, I've always been much more prone to like depression, just being sad and blue. And, I kind of want to do that hobby, but what's the point? It's just a hobby. What is it going to do for my life?
Yeah.
How is it going to make me feel accomplished at all?
Yeah.
And I can't do that as easily as you.
Yeah.
And so I'm much more prone to just be like, vanity, vanity. Man, my kids are growing up so fast. They're already, not babies anymore. And
they're misbehaving terribly.
There's just this chaos. And I try to find beauty in that chaos, but it's much more difficult for me.
Yeah.
And so I think having a foundation that I'm always going back to, because though we have a foundation in believing in the God of the universe and that there is a purpose in all of this and that pain and suffering does exist while we are on earth, but it is not going to continue in the life to come.
Yeah.
Really looking at that and being like, okay, this is not in my hands and I have to show my children, teach my children, and while I'm teaching them, actually live it out myself is very difficult. But it's so important. And we literally have to remind ourselves of this every day because it's so easy for our flesh to just go back to like man, this is just not good. You know, why am I doing this? What is beautiful around me? And so my point is that even though we have this foundation, it is easy for me, at least with my personality type, to fall back into the like, this isn't great.
Well, I will also say that whoever said that life was supposed to be great.
Okay.
So the people, no, hear me out. So the people, life is spent more in turmoil and tragedy and frustration than it is in illicit happiness and joy, right? Yeah. Even just this past couple of years throughout the world, we've just experienced so much that frustrated us as humans. Mm-hmm. Whether you were on what side of the political aisle, you experienced frustration. Mm-hmm. And people act as if this is not a normal human condition. That the normal human condition should be illicit happiness, pleasure, desire fulfilled at all points.
Healthiness,
Exactly, which is the rise of pornography and drug overdoses and all that is this, I need to be pleasured at all points, and that is the purpose of life. Mm-hmm. That is the chief end of man, is to pleasure thyself at all ends meet.
Okay.
And it's not. Yeah. And so suffering and pain is something that we have to learn to cope with. And building a life we love to wake up to is based on a proper categorization and a proper respect for the fact, perspective for the fact that life will be laced with pain and suffering and frustration more than it may be laced with happiness and illicit joy. And the reason that you say I have that is because I do take pleasure in the simplicities of life. We went shopping this week, and you know what? We had enough money to do it. That is every time I go shopping and I get to buy all the groceries that I want, man,
okay, but my
that's
question
a win
is
for me.
To the people that don't feel that.
Okay.
So obviously there was a time in our marriage where we went grocery shopping
and we could spend not much.
Yeah, I felt like, okay, wow, I'm probably going to go over our $60 budget for the week. Yeah.
Yes.
No eating out, nothing, $60.
Yeah.
So how do you find joy in that? How do you find happiness in that, pleasure in that? Or are you just saying you shouldn't? That's just a time in your life where you can't experience that pleasure.
Oh, wow. That is a saucy question. I'm trying to think back to that moment because I think the joy was the fact that we were doing it together.
Okay.
I think the joy was that we were striving and working and trying to work towards something together.
Okay.
So I think in every season you will find satisfaction and solace in different things.
Okay.
I think foundationally, though, your faith has to be rooted in something that there is a better purpose. There is a larger purpose to this suffering.
Right. And that is where, we talk about people in North Korea or in China where they have been awakened. The God of the universe has come to them and welcomed them into his family.
He says, I see you.
Yes.
It's the whole idea of Jehovah Ra in the Old Testament where the Hagar goes out and she's in the wilderness and she looks up to heaven and he can say, I see you, Hagar.
Yeah. And so these people that are in pain and suffering and yet they take on a faith that possibly could lead to more pain and suffering. They could be imprisoned or put to death, but yet they have found joy. They have found this foundation, and even in their circumstances, though there are no pleasures to speak of, what we would consider pleasures. They don't have comfortable living. They don't have all of the food and things that they could ever desire, but yet they have this foundation of joy.
Yes.
And so I think that should definitely speak to us here in America, where we have all of these pleasures, but yet we have so many people that we know personally and just hear about that are just like, nope. What's
Life
the point?
Sucks.
Life sucks. I just go to my job every day. My kids are annoying me. I have to send them off to school, but then they just come back and they're more annoying to me.
Yep.
And then I have to make dinner and clean up, and then we're exhausted. We finally watch some TV, go to bed, and do it all over again tomorrow.
Yes.
And these are just people that we know personally that should have this joy.
And I would say...
Right? So it's like joy, but then is there something on top of that?
I would say there is something on top of it. There is an alive approach to life. I would say, circumstances aside, your background aside, what can you do today to say in 10 years, my life will look differently?
Okay.
Whether it's a simple decision, a physical, tangible decision, outside of maybe your faith, that you can move forward knowing that I want to make a difference in 5 years, in 10 years. Your faith is something that you have to be discussed. The whole point of this episode is, what is the purpose of life? But there comes a point when you just have to, like you said, connect the two and say, there's this pull, a physical and spiritual. And if I can make a physical change, then it makes room for a spiritual change. Because if we are so busy taking Molly to soccer practice and Johnny to baseball and Susie to karate, we don't have any space to dwell upon the spiritual, the supernatural.
Right.
And so all we're doing is playing the limbo game of what I have signed up for. You signed up for the things you're doing. Now, forgive me to speak to the audience for a second. Forgive me if there was a circumstance that you did not have control over. That's not what I'm saying. There are totally possibilities of something out of your control, whether it be somebody else made a decision that impacted you and their sin, their wrongdoing hurt you. My heart goes out to you.
But we also have to be honest in that if we can
we did have a part.
Right.
Or we can make a change moving forward.
Yes, yeah.
But there are, of course, extenuating circumstances that have to be thought of. And my heart goes out to you. But I will say 99% of people, you're in this situation because of poor planning and poor decision making.
Okay, so you're talking about like the financial freedom,
anything,
being home and spending time with your family and your kids, like participating in family events and not just like being on their device all the time and screen time and now they have a bad attitude because you said, okay, we should be done with screen time. And it's just it's this like chaos of we have built this life.
Yes.
Where most of us, whatever the circumstances we have built. And so before we continue talking to our audience about rebuilding this life so that we actually can like waking up to it and love waking up to it.
You got to get foundation.
We do have to go back to the foundation of like, what are we believing in? What are we living for? What are we serving? And obviously that's different for everybody on planet Earth.
Yeah.
For us, we are very clear about what that is. So this really is on my mind because obviously I've struggled a lot postpartum with my twins this time.
Yes, way more than both babies.
Yeah, having 4 children. And for me personally, my own personality is to struggle with the purpose of life more than maybe you. You're very relaxed. You love life. You find simple pleasures to be just so fulfilling.
Very true.
Whereas my whole life I have really struggled with more of like being depressed and feeling like, what's the point? Why would I even do this thing that's supposed to be just for enjoyment?
You don't pursue things for satisfaction. You find it trivial.
I do. I think.
Why would I seek pleasure? What's the point?
Right. Where does pleasure take me in the pursuit of building a life that is worth living? And so that's something I've always struggled with. And then now having 4 young children, finding simple pleasures really for a mom has to be satisfying because in a day-to-day there are so many simple pleasures, but if I don't see them, it is so easy to get bogged down in all the difficulties in life and being a mom and seeing all of a sudden these 4 human beings that are just not quite shaped in a way that society would accept. And there's so much rebellion, there's so much curiosity, but that can lead to what I might see as chaos because
the chaos of curiosity.
Because as they're trying to figure things out, it disrupts my life. And so to stop and be like, okay, this is good, there is joy in this. I have to have something that is a side of me that says, okay, this is good, this is beautiful, this isn't just a disruption to my life. And so last night you and I watched C.S. Lewis, The Most Reluctant Convert, this movie that is new to us. And C.S. Lewis had quite the journey of being born into a religious home and losing his mom to cancer at a young age, his dad being kind of a distant father, and him never really having a religion. As a young boy, it was just all hypocrisy to him. And then growing up and becoming someone who loved philosophy, loved the great works, and felt that there was so much value in this world that we have. But then when he went to Oxford and he talked to different philosophers, and there were atheists that he had as friends, and then there were also Christians that he had as friends, and he really just started seeing the shallowness of some of these philosophers of the past and his present time. And yet those that did see that there is a God of the universe and that there is purpose to life and that we are not just this collision of atoms inside of our brain, that we actually have logic, we have reason, and that's because of a creator. Yeah. Then he started to actually find more purpose in life. He started to see that, okay, we are here for a reason, and it's not just for pain and suffering.
Because he opened with that. He opened with like, if you would have asked me if I believed in God, I would have named off all these reasons that I didn't. And a lot of his reasons were based on the suffering of the world, the disorganization of what it seems like our daily lives are.
Mm-hmm. And then there is a line where he says, there has to be a reason, and there has to be a reason why we see these things as wrong, because there is a straight line for us to say this is correct, and anything that veers off from that is incorrect. But there has to be a straight line. There has to be a correct for us to even understand that there is an incorrect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that for us and for our audience, we all have to ask, what is the purpose of life? Because if we are unhappy, if we are finding that each day just feels like there is no purpose, there is no joy, then how are we going to stop and say, okay, I want to build a life that I love to wake up to, but I have to understand what is the purpose to begin with before I can even build on anything. I have to have a foundation.
Because if you can't build upon a foundation, then you building upon shakiness, shallow ground, and ultimately what the life you're building may not end up be the actual life when you arrive.
Right. You'll arrive and you'll say, it still isn't great. It still isn't what I thought it was going to be. It still isn't giving me any satisfaction or joy.
Yeah. A lot of times when people think of a life they love to wake up to, it's me plus a certain amount of income, right? That's usually the thought process of getting to a life I want. It's like, what's my monetary value? But what you have to realize, and what I've started to realize, is you're the same person, just plus X amount of dollars. And so whatever you are in that moment is who you are, just exemplified. You can reach more vices if you're somebody who's prone to vices. You can pacify yourself more if you're somebody who's pacified by lots of purchasing of clothes and cars and watches and things. It just extrapolates who you are. So we have to figure out who we are at a foundational level. And that's really like the existential question, right? Like, what do you believe in? What do you want your life to look like when you look back? And that kind of helps you set what is the purpose of life. You know, for us, that bases out of our faith. You know, the purpose of life is ultimately to point people towards God and ultimately Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I don't think that's I wouldn't say that that's the purpose.
You wouldn't say that's the purpose of life? For us as believers?
To point people there? I mean, the purpose of life is for us personally to glorify
Going
Him.
back to the Westminster Catechism of love God and glorify Him forever.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's the plan of life.
I think that is the purpose.
Okay.
But then from there, I think it can open up and have offshoots of how do we act out of that? So the purpose is that we are glorifying God.
Okay.
And then everything we do outside of that is an offshoot. It's an expression of that glorifying of God.
So whether let's say we become a painter. We don't paint things that are dark unless they have a message of what is the reverse of that, which would be the light. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but
is that what you're saying?
I think that even gets like too deep into what we might interpret as that person doing, because we might say, why are you painting this dark art? That your heart must not be glorifying God. But there might be an expression of that glorifying God for that artist. Okay. But I think back to like sharing and telling people about this creator of the universe, that is an offshoot. That's an expression of we are so in love and we are so glorifying Him that when you love someone in something, you talk about it. You tell people, you say, there is a burden that you have on you, and I want to share this light with you that can change your world forever. Yeah. You know, and so that's an expression of that love. Yeah. And just like when I am so passionately in love with you, I just want to like tell people about you. And that's not even, that is just a tiny comparison. That doesn't even really express our love that we have for this God, this creator, you know?
Yeah. I think one thing Lewis said in the movie last night, or the guy portraying Lewis, was when I was illuminated with the truth of that God was the creator, I saw everything in life as mortal, and the only thing that was immortal were these people going to either heaven or hell. And he said that changed his entire purpose, his entire direction of his life. And then we have the works that he's written since that point, you know. And so I think like what you're saying is it's the expression of the purpose of life.
Yeah. And so, we talk about from here all these other things that we're doing to build our life that we love to wake up to.
Yeah.
Financial freedom.
Yes.
You being able to be at home and work so that you can spend time with us and our children, and having a beautiful home, going on vacation, spending time with friends and family. All of these things that we love about our life should be expressions of this foundation that we have this joy, and it just bleeds out into these other things.
Yeah.
And it gives us a passion to do all of these other things so much better than if we had this motivation of just maybe lust or greed, or I just hate my job, or I just don't like the situation that I'm in. And these things can all happen even with a good foundation. Those are just the ebbs and flows of life. Like I mentioned earlier, being a mom right now of 4 young children, I struggle each day finding that joy that I know is in me, that I know that I have a foundation. I know that I'm doing this. I've had these children. I'm raising these children the way that I am because I know it is what is good and is what I'm supposed to do. And there is joy in it, but it still can be so heavy. So just because we build this life and we have a good foundation doesn't mean we're not going to struggle and find like just these dark times in our lives.
Yes, and it goes to the age-old question, why are there happy secularists and terribly depressed and angry and frustrated religious people? There are so many religious people I dislike more than maybe some secular people, even personally. Mm-hmm. So what's the answer to that question?
I know.
What for you? Yeah. Where can we go with that?
Yeah, and I think it does come back to a spiritual answer. And Lewis in his works, when you read Mere Christianity, when you read Surprised by Joy, when you read his fiction, Narnia, there is just so much joy that bleeds out of these works. And
did he have joy before or post conversion?
Right. So by his own admission, and the movie talks about this a lot too, that he had a very dark past. He even was he went through a time where he was just very involved in an occult. And he had this lust for the spiritual realm. And I don't think that he had the joy that he talks about. He's always in search, joy. And he's in search for this joy that he knows exists somewhere, and he was searching for it for so long, and he was just so reluctant to admit and surrender to the fact that it was a God of the universe that could provide that joy. And so I think that people that don't have this foundation of Jesus Christ, they are not going to show the same joy that do have it.
They could show kindness, they could show empathy, but the actual category of joy may not be registered. So, for instance, perspective could provide the presentation of empathy, of kindness, of happiness.
I think so, yeah.
So like saying, okay, I am here in America, I could be struggling in a poor country and barely making ends meet, and so therefore I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we talk about a lot, that there are these believers in China or in North Korea that literally to read the Bible or to have any expression of faith in a God, they would go to prison or be murdered.
Yeah, be killed immediately.
But they have such joy even in their circumstances.
Yes.
And I have a friend who, now she's no longer in America. She's not originally from here. And she's a new believer, and she has like so much just joy and just wants to share this with other people.
Yeah.
And yet I've grown up in a Christian home my whole life, and it's just this like, do I share it with people? Do I not?
Yeah.
Why is that? Why do I not have that same burden? That it's not even a burden, but that's what C.S. Lewis called it, is this burden of like, there are souls that don't know this good news. Why don't I have that same urgency?
I think it comes down to like, for those who have much to be forgiven of, they have much to be grateful for, right? And so if you and I have both kind of been through that same path of faith in our family for a long time, and so it's just always been a part of our narrative. So there was never this huge overwhelming moment of transformation. Theirs was slow, gradual, chipping away at our poor character. You know, me and you both had such poor struggles and poor character that we've had to work through, but it's been over time. So the gratefulness is like based on a timeline rather than like a, wow, I was blind, now I see situation.
Yeah, and I think back to that question of why is it that a lot of people that you love to listen to their podcast or you resonate with, they do not share this same faith.
No. I've listened to a lot of evolutionists, a lot of atheists, you know.
And yet they do seem to have just this, what we would call joy, but maybe it's more of just a happiness, or they have a perspective on life that is much more positive than a lot of people of Christianity have. And I do think perspective does help the character of a person a lot. So a lot of these people that you listen to are not originally from America.
Yeah, true. That's so true. Most of them aren't.
So they don't have just this like, oh, everything's easy, somebody's going to give it to me, handouts galore, just live a comfortable life and you didn't really have to suffer or struggle or anything. And so they do have this perspective of gratefulness. And I think in our faith, we would just call that common grace, that this is who we are talking about. True. The God of the universe is not, he doesn't just see people that are good Christians. Like, he is the creator of all people. And so his grace, because of his presence here on earth through his spirit in us, that does pour out on people that still have not converted, if you want to say,
have
not come to life.
The glory, like given him, hey, for this was because of God.
Yeah.
And I think it's because
he's still using them in a way to communicate something that he wants communicated on this earth.
Absolutely, a message of hope, even if it's not necessarily for them in the thread of him. It's still a message of hope to inspire people and encourage people to not give up on life.
I read the book Radical. And it was definitely...
You didn't feel great about it.
No, because I didn't agree with a lot of it, but then it was still like a good checkup on, okay, where is our mindset? Where are our hearts? And it is so hard to look at the way somebody's living and decide, are they spiritually and foundationally solid? And they have this life that they love, and I can't decide that for them. They have to know, and we have to know. And so our audience, like, this is such a question. Like, we have to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of life? Maybe you feel like your purpose is different than what we have just discussed. But you do have to ask yourself that, because we cannot build this house. We can't, this idea of a life that we love to wake up to, without knowing what the foundation is of what is the point of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is really the chief question that you must answer before you move on to anything else, because that's what helps align all the pieces of the puzzle. It helps know where your money is going to go. It helps where your time's going to go, how you're going to speak to your children. And
every day when it gets hard, saying, why am I doing this? And if you don't know why, then it's not going to be a very pretty house.
And if your why is not a personal conviction, you'll be living somebody else's why.
Or you'll be living it like, I don't want that, so I'm going to do anything.
Yeah, you'll oppose the why.
Yeah.
And then you'll be living a book's why, or this random, somebody from the great books. Let's say you really capture and grasp onto one of the authors, and you're like, I'm going to live for this why. But is that yours? I think why for yourself comes from a culmination of things that you've ingested. I think that's why reading these great books has been so important for us, is because it'll strengthen. Just reading through the Iliad, we were like, wow, we are so grateful for the God that we serve. Based on the fact that he chose us, we didn't choose him. We were looking at the gods that these people were worshiping, and they were just like toying with them, and thought, just what a tragic existence to think that you're just a pawn, as one of the video titles we had, are we just pawns in the hands of the gods? It was such a tragic and overwhelming existence to think, to live that way.
And I think a lot of people do look at the God of Christianity, and they could maybe say that, we're still just pawns.
For sure.
And that is where our faith goes a lot deeper, in understanding that we don't have every answer that our God has. He is the God of the universe. And our minds cannot comprehend everything that he's working and doing for our good. And we just have to believe his promises. And that might sound to some people like we're walking in darkness. But it's not. for a whole lot of reasons. It might be for another episode.
Yeah, for sure. And then you get into the argument of the materialist who believes only what exists is fundamental to anything that they believe. And so you have to then cope with that. And you have to, it's a life of study.
It's a life of faith. Whatever we choose to believe in, we still have to have faith in it.
Every worldview has a foundation of faith. Every worldview has something that can't be explained, so to speak, right? And so that's where you have to choose wisely what your foundation will be, what your purpose of life is.
Yep. Sound good?
Yeah.
I think this episode was really important.
Yeah.
And I hope that y'all really are about to sit down and pull out a journal or something and start thinking about what is your foundation.
Absolutely.
Let us know in the comment section below what you have on your mind. We would love to start up a conversation with you.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys in the next episode.